Welcome back to another exciting edition of the College Tailgaters. My name is Chris America, coming to you from bright, sunny Orlando, Florida. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Sean Daly. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Chris. Like you said, I'm Sean Daly, and it's neither bright nor sunny here in Illinois today. We're in the teens, actually, right now.
Are you still getting that snow that everybody's getting?
Season is coming to an end with an exciting bowl season here. And I'm excited for this episode. We got a special guest host with us today.
Yeah, a special guest coming to us from Sports Radio America. He is the one, the only, the legendary Memphis Spence. How you doing, man?
I don't know how legendary I am, but I appreciate you guys allowing me to come on to this show, College Tailgaters. I mean, I know there's going to be some barbecue, right? There's barbecue involved in tailgating, right?
It's not tailgating unless there's
no barbecue.
No, there's barbecue.
Okay,
it's not
good.
tailgating without barbecue, my man.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Listen, you are so legendary that those who are lactose intolerant can't handle you.
I have nothing for that, but let's get on with the show, my man.
Yeah, so where can we find you, Memphis?
You can find me, well, you can't find me on Facebook. You can look, you can try, but you can't find me because I don't talk to people on Facebook. I don't deal with people on Facebook. Facebook is not where I am. I'm on Twitter, at Memphis Spence. You can always find me there for a quick conversation. Sometime throughout the day, I'll be lurking around and trolling as I shall please.
Yeah, I like watching you trolling around, and I also like listening to your two shows. You're on Sports Radio America. What are the times for those shows, the names?
Well, I'm on the College Credit Hour. It's the oldest show on Sports Radio America, the initial show on Sports Radio America, and actually the show that I've done the longest. I did that on Memphis's jazz station, interestingly enough, when I was there at the University of Memphis. And I kind of just, ignited it about 7 years ago, and that was the first piece of programming for Sports Radio America. Also, the Sunday Gridiron, one of our more popular shows, it's supposed to be on Mondays and Thursdays now, live from 6 to 8. We're changing around a lot of the schedules, and you'll get a brand new schedule for Sports Radio America coming for the new year. A lot of trying to get everybody on the right time for that one to make that happen. But you can always catch me on Sports Radio America, the College Credit Hour. That's my show, noon to 2 Eastern Standard Time, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays on the Sports Radio America network.
And that's at sportsradioamerica.com or the TuneIn Radio app. You can find Scout Team Radio and the College Tailgaters at scoutteamradio.com or obviously Podbean, iTunes, all that other good stuff. Let's get rolling. So your name is Memphis Spence. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you're from Memphis?
I got my name Memphis Spence. It's interesting. I'm not actually from Memphis, but people associate me with Memphis. I'm actually from Nashville. But because I went to the University of Memphis and kind of fell in love with the culture, with the sports scene, and everything else, and been repping Memphis hard probably even before I went to college. A lot of guys, there's a lot of Spences out there, so I became the Memphis Spence because I was the one always repping Memphis. So I'm not actually from Memphis, but I represent Memphis, and Memphis represents me.
Well, let's segue that into some college basketball. How's Memphis looking this year?
Ooh, it's I wish the basketball team I had the same outlook on that as I did for the football team at the beginning of the year. Norvell, definitely somebody working with the talent level and in the conference. I'm not sure about Tubby Smith and his ability to be able to get this Tigers team to a respectable level this year. And one of the reasons was recruiting. He's just not the recruiter he was. The good news is, and the reason why he's there, is we will have no scandals because he will not go out on a limb to recruit anybody at all, if he even knows how to. He's very old school, tries to recruit guys for his 80s defense, the ball line defense, which he helped put together. It's very similar to something that you'd see VCU do back in the day, what Texas is running now, what Virginia runs. But it's kind of like the prehistoric version of what they run. But Tubby Smith's still trying to get people, for that particular type of defense. And he's missing out on big guys, big names. He's not able to recruit Memphis yet. And if you're in Memphis and you can't recruit Memphis, then you're missing out on 5-star athletes all the time. I mean, case in point, Chioza. You're a Florida guy. Chioza, guy from Memphis. Everybody knew that, and it was reported in the commercial repeal that his Memphis was his first choice. How he didn't get a serious phone call or follow-up from that basketball staff, I have no idea, because the guys will go to the SEC. It's not as if they're not going to get offers from the Big Ten, SEC, or whatever, but a lot of guys growing up in Memphis, they want to play for that hometown squad, and if they don't get treated seriously, if they're not actually, courted like everybody else will court them, then they'll go to the other programs, and good for them. Some of them looking just to get out of Memphis will take that road to get out, but many notable players, many SEC teams, many ACC teams, many Big Ten teams, a few Pac-12 and Big 12 teams have players on their roster right now from that city.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying he's pretty much the Randy Shannon of Miami, kind of get them out of that scandal.
Well, yes.
Lots of trouble,
yes.
But won't win you many games. Good guy to have for young men on the team, but not good enough to get you the wins.
He doesn't have the staff in place in order to actually, because he's not a tactician. I mean, one of the things that when Tubby Smith was at Kentucky, one of the things that the Kentucky fans knew is that he didn't recruit that basketball team. And, his son, Saul Smith, I have no idea how that nepotism creeped in and how he got onto that University of Kentucky basketball squad at the time. But, he couldn't recruit, and the program showed that he couldn't recruit after about 5 years of him at the helm. What he could do was he was a really good mentor of men, no scandals at all. He was the one following Pitino, and we all know now that Pitino may have been involved in some hanky-panky while he was even there at the University of Kentucky. We know that he was involved in stuff at the University of Louisville now, as the FBI has actually made us all aware of that. So, but bringing in a guy like Tubby Smith, he's not about that. He's not about taking any of those types of risks and whatnot. So he's very healthy for the basketball squad and kind of removes your name from any type of nonsense going on with your program. If you want your program squeaky clean and you don't care about how many wins you have, then Tubby Smith would be the name for you.
Well, Tubby Smith sounds a lot like a guy named Lovie Smith over at Illinois. We've heard all season long about the woes that Sean's been going through. Is basketball looking any brighter for you this year, Sean?
Not this year. They're relying on a lot of freshmen in Champaign. They have 3 freshmen who contribute pretty regularly. And, they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. 2 of those were conference losses in overtime. Their last loss came out in Vegas to UNLV, where the freshmen, they played like freshmen. Their new coach, Brad Underwood, plays a really high-pressure style of defense. And the freshmen don't really understand it yet, and they're fouling a little bit too much. So in that game, Illinois lost by 7, and UNLV shot 48 free throws to Illinois' 15. So that right there just shows you too much fouling. You're not going to win a game like that. But the future's looking bright. Underwood's a good coach. He's made the tournament. He's been a head coach for 4 years. He's made the tournament every year. He's been a head coach. This year, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think they're building the right way. And much like Spence, you're talking about needing to recruit Memphis, Illinois' biggest Achilles heel for the last decade has been not being able to recruit Chicago, which a lot of people consider is, one of the top markets for high school basketball.
Exactly.
You got a lot of top players there. And you got people like Jaleel Okafor, Derrick Rose, even going back there. They all go to different schools. They all go to Duke, Kentucky's, Derrick Rose, Memphis, Michigan State. I mean, the country is littered with Chicago talent. And Underwood actually recruited the number 1 Illinois player next year. So this year they're looking to build. We're looking for growth out of these freshmen. And, yeah, maybe an NIT appearance, a good NIT run would be a step in the right direction for this program. I don't expect Underwood to go 5 for 5 making tournaments.
Yeah, so Sean, one name you left out is Dwayne Wade, too, also from Chicago, that didn't go to Illinois.
Yeah, Tom Crean got him up there to Marquette. It's been a long running problem. And Illinois hasn't even been targeting these high level players. They've been getting a lot of like the third and fourth best players off Simeon, which is just an NBA factory. That's where Rose went. That's where Okafor went. Jabari Parker was a Chicago guy. But yeah, they got a guy coming in next year, and I'm going to butcher his name. It's Io like Damnasu or something, but the number one player in Illinois, great player. They got Illinois Mr. Basketball Mark Smith this year. So things are trending the right way. He's just got to dig himself out of this hole that John Gross and the previous staff kind of pigeonholed them into.
Yeah, and after the season that the Florida Gators had in football, the future was looking bright this year for the Gator basketball team. We rolled in, I think, number 7, climbed up to number 5 last week after we played Gonzaga. We beat them in overtime. We came close to upsetting Duke, and I think the excitement got a little too much for these Gators, which is surprising because you guys are talking about how you have a lot of young talent. We actually have a lot of older veteran talent, and they just did not look good coming out of that weekend PK 80 or 180, whatever it was called, that Phil Knight tournament, and just came out real flat against FSU, and then Loyola Chicago just put the hurting on us, and I couldn't believe it, man. How do we lose to Loyola Chicago, Sean?
Man, that game, I remember I was not watching it at the beginning, and I texted you a little before halftime because Loyola was up double digits on Florida. And, just like everyone else, I was expecting Florida to come back and win that game pretty handily, but credit to that Loyola defense. They played tough the whole game, and they never took their foot off the gas. And here we are. Like you said, it's a little surprising for a team like Florida to lose with a lot of upperclassmen. You see some of these ranked teams lose early in the year when they're relying on a lot of these one-and-done players. And that's just the freshman inexperience. But Florida, other teams that lost, like Kansas, that we'll get to in a minute, it's surprising that they lose this early with all the upperclassmen talent that they have.
Yeah, and it was good to see. The week could have ended completely bad. They could have just packed up shop and called it a week. But we came back yesterday, I think it was, against number 17 Cincy, another American Conference team that is looking strong this season. Glad we got a win against Cincinnati. And hopefully that's a good enough win to springboard us. And you did mention Kansas. Florida wasn't the only team to lose. We had several upsets in the top 10. Kansas loses to 2 Pac-12 teams, Washington and Arizona State. Does that surprise you at all, Memphis Spence?
Washington, no. Because, there's a lot of great talent out there at Washington. Arizona State a little bit. And I know Arizona State is kind of flying under the radar in the Pac-12 and has been for quite some time, Arizona being the elite program out there. But if the Sun Devils are in business to actually start knocking off top-ranked teams, then we're going to have to start giving some more credence to that Pac-12 and their scheduling. One of the things that I also saw this weekend, the upset of Duke, it looks as if there's a power shift almost, as if it's going from the ACC over to the Pac-12 in terms of where the basketball talent is. And I know that over these past years, it's been the ACC and the Big Ten, and we like to throw in the Big East, or what's left of the Big East, as one of the more power brokers in terms of college basketball. But if Arizona State's winning, Arizona State, generally speaking, is a middle of the road Pac-12 team when it comes to basketball. That kind of means that on the forefront or early in this year, I would say that the Pac-12 in my mind right now is actually outpacing the ACC and or the Big Ten in terms of basketball supremacy at this point.
Yeah, and you brought up how the Pac-12 is taking over. One of the other upsets, I don't even consider this one of the upset because I thought Arizona was ranked high. I haven't really paid attention to them, so they dropped out of the top 25, but they just upset TAMU. But wasn't Arizona one of the schools named in the FBI Adidas investigation? Memphis?
Yes, they were. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I thought that this would be a down year for Arizona and the Pac-12, actually, because USC is another school named in that investigation, and there's a few more actually that are probably going to come out here over the Christmas holiday. I know people are going to try and bury the lead over Christmas and New Year's in bowl games and everything else, but Arizona definitely one of the more prominent programs, even more prominent in my opinion than Louisville, even though Louisville had the marquee coach on the sideline there. But yeah, Arizona is in these FBI investigations, and that's why I thought it would be a down year for the Pac-12 as those investigations go on. A lot of people wouldn't be focused on actually winning, but covering their backside so they can continue playing basketball in future seasons. But no, not the case. It looks as if the Pac-12 is coming out swinging and knocking off competitors early, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I love about college basketball is teams actually schedule each other in the Power 5 conferences, and they actually schedule the American.
Imagine
and we get
that.
to see how the competition shakes out. But you had also mentioned Duke losing to Boston College. Sean, I know we talked about this a little bit when Boston College beat Florida State, how Boston College was this program in football that didn't win any games, and now they're upsetting Florida State. And Boston College basketball was also atrocious. Here they are beating Duke. Did you get a chance to watch that game, Sean?
Yeah, I watched the second half of this one, and I might pump the brakes on the whole narrative that they're like trending the same way as the football program. They are definitely getting better, but this could have been one of those blind squirrel finding a nut situations. Duke played pretty poorly towards the end. Grayson Allen was 1 for 9 from 3, and that's not going to happen all the time. That being said, I love to see Duke lose. I love to hate Duke. But I also think we need to be careful, because I think hating Duke is becoming so popular that we're about to have some like hipster faction that starts to like them. And that's the last thing we need is more Duke fans.
Very true.
I honestly don't hate Duke. Once Florida was on their run with Tim Tebow and Chris Leak and Urban Meyer, I kind of realized, wow, I only hate teams because they're successful. I don't really understand why everybody hates Florida so much. So I try not to hate teams just because they win, but there is reason to hate Grayson Allen. And you mentioned how he went 1 for 9. I watched him against Florida. I was not impressed with Grayson Allen at all. Memphis, where does this hype come from for this kid? Is it because he sometimes does good and throws temper tantrums that we have to talk about him?
I mean, kind of. I think he's one of those basketball players that everybody has some sort of hope in. He's the guy that, hey, I could be as good as him if I work hard enough, if I'm good enough. I remember watching him way back when we at Sports Radio America we do and cover a couple of Big Shots AAU tournaments, and I remember seeing that kid, when he was 16, thinking, maybe. But the way he developed in between 16 and 18 and actually, got a scholarship, that blew my mind. So he is really a hard worker, listens to his coaches. And I think what's undervalued today in basketball is not only having some sort of talent to work with, but the ability to listen to your coaches and be able to develop. And that's one of the things that he has done and is probably a model for. I mean, he's what they call a coach's player. He may not be the most talented guy on the court, but as long as he can be coached up and as long as he listens to the coach and actually, kind of implements what the coach is saying, he can be a coach's player and a guy that you see on a court that can make a big difference, especially in college basketball, where his game may not translate the same way in the NBA. But that's probably why people are talking about him, or there's the hype behind his name, is because he wasn't really ranked very high when it came to in high school. I think he was like a 2-star, maybe a 3-star, lower grade 3-star player when it was in high school, but he worked his tail off his junior and senior year and got his game up to where he could actually get an offer from a school like Duke.
Well, let's move on to the last top 10 team to lose. And Sean, I got some good news for you, buddy.
That's right.
Notre Dame loses to Ball State. Indiana basketball at its finest.
Yes, Notre Dame loses to Ball State at home, which is even better for me. It was a good game. Ball State won that one. I think they hit a three with like under 2 seconds remaining in that game. But yeah, it was. You love when teams like Ball State, you know that this Notre Dame game, they've circled it all year. It's the most important game on their schedule to them. And they went in there and they took care of business. Mike Bray looks like a guy who's trying to sell me a used Honda. I'm happy to see them lose games. And yeah, this one put a smile on my face for sure.
Yeah, I know you always love hearing Notre Dame lose. I think you're the only person from Chicago that hates Notre Dame. And I think it's great because I know everybody down south doesn't like Notre Dame, especially down in South Florida, where, you know, obviously you had that Miami-Notre Dame rivalry. So speaking of Miami, let's move into college football. Really depressing weekend. Nothing really going on other than one football game and a Heisman Trophy we knew the end of the movie for. Memphis, I've been talking to Sean about this all season long. Is the Heisman Trophy, has it lost its luster? Has it lost its appeal? Because the last few years, I feel like we've known who's going to win it by mid-November, and I just have no reason to tune in. What do you think?
And it's funny that you say that because that's been a topic on a lot of people's shows here, especially in the past month and a half, now that we all know that Baker Mayfield was not only the front runner, but also won the trophy. Just like we knew last year that Lamar Jackson was the front runner and won the trophy. And I think it has a lot to do with how how people vote on that. I don't have a vote on that. I know a couple of people that do. And back in the day, it used to be like mail-in ballot. And people used to say, hey, I need to figure out exactly by, week 8 or 9 who it is so I can mail in my ballot and first it can count. But now it's all electronic. But you still have a lot of people in the from the mail-in ballot days that still have votes, haven't relinquished them at all. And they still vote, I think, a little bit too early. I don't think that you should even count a vote until you actually see who won each conference, because a lot of things happen. Like last year, Lamar Jackson, not to say that he wasn't deserving of it at all, but, he won that Heisman well before he saw they went into Houston and got dropped like a sack of rocks by an American Athletic team, which should have teed everybody off like, hey, this conference is much better than people think it is. But, if your Heisman Trophy winner is losing, as a matter of fact, I think Houston beat that's right. Houston beat Oklahoma last year too. So there's 2 Heisman Trophy losers basically to Houston and an American Athletic team. And I think people, they're not really giving any type of credence to the end of the season and how people finish. And back in the day, I could understand why, because you had, the limitations of communication. But now in this day and age, I think that you should continue to build up momentum behind somebody and see how they finish the season. Every one of these games count. The games at the beginning of the season don't count, or I say maybe even less important than some of the games at the end. And I'd like to see people vote after they see how each one of these players finished the season.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is the September Heisman Trophy winner is always different from the December one. And I was telling Sean, I remember when we were talking when we first started the show, I think we started the beginning of October, Sean, and we were all on the Saquon Barkley train. And I said, obviously he was a good candidate for it at the time, but I kind of liked him to Leonard Fournette, how the last 2 seasons Leonard Fournette was the September Heisman Trophy winner. And every year he always got injured, or he played Alabama and ran for 46 yards. So I got to ask, Sean, I warned you of it. You're a Big Ten fan. You love the Big Ten. You breathe the Big Ten. What happened to Saquon Barkley after mid-October?
Yeah, so like you said, we awarded him the Heisman pretty much. We gave it out to him. He had a string of incredible games where he's putting up video game type numbers. He's putting up the highlights that they were showing on the SportsCenter top 10 every week. I think teams really started to game plan for him, and they decided if Penn State was going to beat you, it wasn't going to be because of Saquon Barkley. And it's a credit to Penn State and Trace McSorley especially that they still had a good level of success this year. Only the 2 losses on the year, and they're both kind of fluky losses. but I think teams committed to making Trace McSorley beat them instead of Saquon Barkley. I still think Barkley is probably the most talented running back in college football this year, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the first one drafted. But yeah, I think teams just they're stacked and win games in other ways.
Yeah, I go back and forth between Barkley and Bryce Love as far as who is the best running back. If Chicago were to take a running back, who would you want the Bears to take, Sean?
I would want Saquon Barkley for sure. Not that the Bears need any running back help. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but Howard had just under 150 rushing yards, and they got a good change of pace in Tariq Cohen. But Bryce Love, most of the scouts see him as a round 3 pick at best. He hasn't proven he can catch the ball, really, and he's a little bit smaller. So he might be a good number 2 in a 1-2 punch in some backfield, but Barkley has all the makings of a bell cow running back at the next level.
And Memphis Spence, what was your observation of Saquon Barkley kind of disappearing after mid-October?
Well, it's kind of what we all expected. I remember saying that I expect, the narrative to shift from him right after he sees Ohio State. I mean, it was bound to happen because it's not as if we haven't seen this before. You pointed it out before. I actually honestly thought that, the narrative would shift behind like either Josh Adams or Bryce Love or somebody else, because usually when the hype is built up behind you and somebody knows you're coming, there's going to be game planning for you. And stopping Saquon Barkley wasn't a priority maybe at the beginning of the season for some teams. It was just drawing something up. But, once you start putting up those video game numbers, you're not going to be the one to be able to beat our team. And I know a lot of defensive coordinators decided, let's take this away and see if Penn State can still beat us. So, but yeah, that's something that I actually expected. I wrote something about, Josh Adams probably after the Ohio State game will probably start getting more love. And then all of a sudden, what did Miami do with Josh Adams? They pretty much wrapped him up, turnover chain and all. So I think that, any of these guys that we think are Heisman winners at the beginning, I think we probably should, hold off and even projecting it. I don't like in terms of college. I don't like preseason polls, and I don't like preseason Heisman winners or anything like that, or people to watch. I really want to see what they do on the field, at least for the first month, in order to actually get a good gauge on what we have for this particular team or player.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I always hate that the polls also base their next decision week by week off of what they decided off the preseason poll. They don't make new adjustments. You don't see, unless a team loses to a low-ranked team, they don't move much when they lose a game. Very true. If you're out of the top 25, they just slowly move you up the poll until the last week. You have to just keep on winning, which I don't really understand or get. But let's wrap up the regular season with the Army-Navy game. That was your kind of style game there, Sean. Your Big Ten love to run the football in the snow with the cold weather. That was about as 1945 football as it gets.
I loved it, man. I was hoping for a while that there wouldn't be a pass thrown in this game. If they mixed in a little more punting, Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney would have been knocking at the door to try to get Navy over, to try to get Army in. A few more punts and they would have been there. But yeah, what a fun game to watch. And I mean, those video packages they put together before the game that they were airing, my God, like those are some of the best things that you could see on TV. Just a lot of fun game. Of course, it comes down to a field goal at the end, and feel bad for the kicker having to attempt a long field goal in the snow. But Army, that's 2 years in a row after they lost 14 consecutive times in this game, and Army gets to take home the Commander-in-Chief trophy, which Navy and Air Force have had a stranglehold on for the past 20 years.
Yeah, and you got to give it to that kicker too, because he nailed that kick. It had the distance, and it was right on. It just had too much of a left list to it. Just kept listing to the left and was no good. But the thing I love about this game, Memphis, is not just the old school values of it, not even the patriotism of it, but more so the camaraderie and the good sportsmanship of it. A lot of teams will shake hands and everything, and you see the signing of jerseys in the NFL and stuff, but that's really it. I like that there's this tradition where they both sing some sort of song together, and then obviously the team that wins gets to sing the second song. That's pretty cool to see still today.
Absolutely. And what always sing last. That's the whole, when you're in that kind of rivalry, always sing last. And it's a joy for me. I love that game. That's my favorite college football game, by the way, out of everything. I put that on my board to watch more than the Iron Bowl even. And I think that not only is it pure football, but the camaraderie and sportsmanship is, like you said, missing out of a lot of these other rivalries. I mean, you look back at the season and you look at, certain players on Tennessee and what happened with Alabama. You look at your Heisman winner and what happened at Kansas, and you're like, well, is there still sportsmanship in this in college athletics? And then at the end of the season, they kind of wrap everything up and put a big bow on it. Shout out to Ahmad Bradshaw and also to Zach Abbey, the two quarterbacks there at Army and Navy. By the way, nobody ever throws out the stat lines for guys like Ahmad Bradshaw. And not only did they win the Commander-in-Chief trophy, but did anybody know that he actually finished up 5th in the nation in terms of rushing yards? And that is including running backs. I mean, he beat the likes of Bryce Love. Well, no, not Bryce Love. I think Bryce Love was one of the only guys in front of him. But he did beat guys like Keon Johnson and Royce Freeman and Ronald Jones and Lamar Jackson even, J.K. Dobbins. This guy actually had more rushing yards than all of the other names that get a whole lot of credit during the season. And this is a guy that is not only working on the football field itself, but he's also working on behalf of all Americans, which I love. And he'll be one of the people serving our nation here very soon as a senior. I think it was a great win for him as a senior, something he'll never forget, and hopefully he'll take that into the rest of his career.
Yeah, and you'd love to see when those guys finally finish off their contract or their duty to their country and end up on an NFL team and go to work there. And like you said, it was a perfect bow to the season. It's a bittersweet bow to the season. And another thing that ended this past weekend, I think for the most part, which I found entertaining the last 2 weeks, was the coaching carousel. Looks like it's finally wrapping up. There's a few loose ends there, here and there, but Taggart goes to FSU, and I'll step off because I'm a Gator fan, and anything I say gets viewed as I'm just a hater of FSU. But I think both of you guys, I know Memphis Spence, you said on your show that it was a kind of a ho-hum, safe hire for FSU. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that here on the show?
Yeah, I'll expound on that a little bit because I don't think he's somebody can be independently a good coach, and Taggart is. I got a chance to speak with Taggart. I actually know a couple of coaches on his squad. Well, at least on his squad that was at USF and on Oregon that he took with him. But I've been watching that guy and got a chance to talk to him while he was at Western Kentucky, and what he did in terms of rebuilding that program was utterly amazing. He's not a guy that I think that would fit right with FSU unless you consider FSU a rebuilding project right now. And the reason why is because if you look at his resume, he doesn't have any outstanding records first year in. He's not like a Norvell that picks up the galloping horse and just keeps riding it out and gets more out of it maybe than the last guy. He's a guy that you bring in when you have nothing. Like, I think, let's put it like this. I think Taggart would look great at Illinois. I think he goes in and does a better job even than Lovie Smith at putting together the foundation of a program and then consecutive wins and bringing that program after people get into a system and these guys get into a system after about 3 or 4 years, making it relevant again. But FSU, in my mind, has been a relevant program here, at least lately. They won a national championship just in 2013, I believe. So I don't think he's the right guy for the position. Now, that being said, he can prove me wrong. He's good enough in order to come in this situation, but I think that he's going to have to set expectations immediately early, because I see that there may be another 8-9 win season next year, and I don't think that's what FSU is looking for when they hire a coach of his level.
Yeah, I think he's kind of a wait and see type coach. You have some things that you like about his resume. He's turned programs around like Kentucky, Western Kentucky, like USF, but he has no bowl wins in 8 seasons, which a lot of people try to attribute to the fact that he's left twice, now a third time, before he could play in a bowl game. But it's still, you still have 5 years where you didn't take a team to a bowl. And it's just, he could end up taking FSU, continuing what Jimbo Fisher started, or what some people will say Bobby Bowden started, really. Or he can kind of be maybe just another Will Muschamp or a Coach Mack, who seemed like had a lot of promise, seemed really good, but just can't coach against big-name players. Dabo Swinney is nobody to mess around with. Sean, what did you think about the hire?
I thought the Taggart hire was safe. I think they're paying him a lot for a pretty unproven coach. You talked about his bowl record, 0-1 in bowl games. But he got 6 years at $5 million a year, so $30 million for 6 years. This is his third head coaching job in the last 365 days. Well, it was at the time that he accepted it, which has actually changed the structure of some of these new coaching contracts being handed out. Josh Heupel got, and we'll talk about him at UCF in a minute, but he got a clause in his contract where if Heupel leaves before 2020, he's got to pay UCF $10 million. Because they're scared of a Taggart-type situation where someone gets a little bit of success and leaves for something bigger and brighter. I think Taggart, though, is a good coach. But like Spence, like you were saying, I don't know if he's the guy who's going to take them back to national prominence. I know Florida State fans were kind of shooting for the stars. Our good friend Mac Scout team was talking about going after Belichick and Urban Meyer and, just ludicrous things that are, would never happen. I think Taggart is safe. I think he's probably like a B to a B plus coaching grade without even, having coached a game there.
Yeah, that was Mac talking smack when Jimbo Fisher was the head coach to me, because I had made a comment about how we were going after the best coach available, and he was trying to talk some trash about grow some big balls and go after the top name coaches. And I said, well, the top name coaches are pretty much set, which I said were Saban, Meyer, and Belichick. And he says, well, you got to at least call them. And then when Jimbo leaves, it changed from you got to do that to no, Taggart's our guy and yada yada. He's an interesting guy to talk to. I love Mac from Scout Team. Let's move on quickly here as we're running out of time. Memphis Spence, you spent a good hour of your show last week talking about Chad Morris to Arkansas. Quickly tell me why you hate that move.
Chad Morris has not done really enough to take over an SEC program. He hasn't really beaten any SEC teams. I mean, when you look at what he did with SMU, is anybody really impressed? I mean, are you going to really hire a guy that can't get – now, what he's done with SMU is respectable, but if you're talking about Arkansas, you're talking about going into a conference where you have to play against Nick Saban, now Jimbo Fisher. He hasn't beaten the likes of like Norvell's and Major Applewhites. So I don't know if he's the right kind of guy that you're going to need there. I think Arkansas is actually going to take a step back in terms of that coaching decision, at least for a while, because it's going to be on-the-job training with Chad. I don't think that this is a home run hire. As a matter of fact, this is probably one of the hires that I'm still scratching my head about. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, I'd say keep Bielema. If you're looking at guys like Chad, I don't see any way that this is a better hire than what you had. And I think it's just a sign of the times where people are so interested in getting rid of who they have just because of the record that they have, and not really thinking about who they can replace this person with, especially with the coaching atmosphere that's out there now. So I think that Arkansas takes a step back. I'm very happy about that, because being a Memphis fan, Arkansas is like, they try to treat us like the a little brother because they're in the SEC. However, the University of Memphis still has a winning record historically against the University of Arkansas, and looks like it's going to continue because Chad Morris has never beaten Norvell, and Norvell I think is 2 or 3-0 against him. I think that'll continue even with SEC talent.
Well, you mentioned a lot about Norvell. He signs an extension. That's got to be exciting for you as a Memphis alum.
Absolutely. It's finally you finally start looking at where your money's going as a booster. And I think I was telling you guys this off air a little while ago that it was a long road to actually get here from Tommy West to this point, to having Norvell. It's been quite a road indeed. It's watching the university, because the University of Memphis, it's interesting that we had this for a while. We just haven't necessarily offered it. We've always been in a category where we could offer like lower tier Power 5 money, lot of talent, just like basketball talent I was saying earlier. There's a lot of football talent in the University of Memphis, and I mean that, or at Memphis, the city, which we're trying to get to the university. I mean, there are guys like your man that was the center of that movie, The Blind Side. He was playing in high school there in Memphis. I mean, if there are movies of guys and offensive tackles and whatnot being made, it's ripe with talent. And just being such a small city, it's not even as big as Nashville. Being a small metropolis, though, if you can get at least some of the talent coming out of places like Memphis East or places like that, then you can actually build a program, and you have walk-ons like Anthony Miller, a walk-on that nobody knew about out of the city of Memphis, and now up for the Biletnikoff Award. I think he lost it, but he was at least a finalist, and he was just a walk-on. But you have that type of talent there in city, and a guy like Norvell, as long as he can recruit that, and that's still to be proven, but as long as he can recruit that type of talent and get them, at least some of them, to come into the program, then I think it's good sailing for in the future for this program. It's a program that's beat plenty of SEC teams, killed the futures and Heisman hopes of a lot of notable quarterbacks, and we look to continue to do that.
Yeah, being a UCF fan, it's exciting to see that one coach in the American can actually decide to try to build on something, not jump to the next big Power 5 job where he thinks he can, just because he's in a Power 5, automatically win a national title, which I don't think people understand that that's not how that works. You don't just get to show up in the Power 5 and you get handed a national title. You still have to coach and earn it. But it was good to see a college coach like Norvell sign that extension, and I hope other coaches in the American can see that and see. I want to see Norvell continue that success at Memphis and other American teams to continue that success, because you've talked about it, I've talked about it. The American Conference is rife with really good football programs. Houston was up there last year and the year prior to that. Memphis has always been a player. UCF, they had their down year in George O'Leary's last year. But you see how it just takes a decent coach or a good coach. The jury's still out on to how good Scott Frost really is, given that he was only there for 2 years. But he turned that program around really fast. And it's all over the place in the American Athletic Conference. And I hope more American Athletic Conference coaches decide to stay, and that more American Athletic Conference teams or football programs decide to invest money and to give their coaches a contract that's at least somewhat competitive with the Power 5. Sean, you mentioned Heupel coming over to UCF. I thought that was a great hire by them. Danny White, the AD at UCF, knocked it out of the park, man. Out of all the hires that went on this offseason, based on what UCF needed, what they needed to replace, hiring Heupel and then adding Randy Shannon as their defensive coordinator, I thought was a really good move. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Heupel Shannon combo is one of the best hires, along with the Norvell extension. Something that goes unnoticed with the Norvell one is the assistant salaries got increased from $250,000 to over $2.5 million. So that can really help build the program. Heupel has a lot of success with quarterbacks. He coached Sam Bradford when he was at Oklahoma. Drew Lock is now NFL bound. So I think it's a great hire, and I think they're going to continue to have some success in the American.
All right, Sean, Memphis, real quick. What did you think of the Tennessee hire? You're from Tennessee. Tell us about Pruitt finally ending Tennessee fans' misery.
They got a guy who I think they want, and it's still hard to tell, but he's going to be okay. He's going to be his mindset. I think it's going to work at Tennessee. I think he was a better hire than most people are giving him a credit for, but I still think that's a work in progress. Not a home run by any stretch of the imagination. Doesn't really put Tennessee anywhere except maybe back into third place in the SEC East.
Well, they're dipping into the reality television stars. He was the coach on Two-A-Days back on MTV in the day, so I guess Snooki and The Situation weren't available for the job. But I think Pruitt will do all right at Tennessee.
I didn't even realize that, man. That's a good call on that one. Hey, kudos to Pruitt for taking the job. I think it's a risk, but listen, I guess is being the defensive coordinator at Alabama a step up or a step down as being the head coach at Tennessee right now? It looks like it's a step down to go from Alabama defensive coordinator to head coach at Tennessee. But if he can get the kind of success Kirby Smart has, what's that?
No, that's a really good question. I think that's a question that I think I'm going to bring on to my show next. What's a better job, defensive coordinator at Alabama or head coach of Tennessee?
Yeah,
I know which one's the better paycheck.
Which one's the more secure job, though? All you got to do at Alabama is just, hey, Nick, is this a good idea? Yeah, okay, let's go with that then. And you get to keep a job as defensive coordinator. Just stay under Nick Saban's good graces, and he'll keep you forever.
Yeah, you got that right.
All right, so
Absolutely.
do you guys? Let's wrap up the show with some game balls. You guys got any game balls?
Yeah, I got one. I got a game ball for I don't know the writer's name, but whoever was writing for the Oregonian newspaper. I'm a big fan of puns, and this might have been the best one I saw. So Oregon just hired Mario Cristobal as their head coach, and the headline in their newspaper was "Ducks see future in Cristobal." And man, that's an all-time pun right there. Pass off to them. Game ball to the Oregonian.
All right, what about you, Memphis Spence?
At this point, you have to give a game ball to all the players on Boston College in basketball, right? You knock off the Duke team that everybody had ranked as the number one squad in the nation out of nowhere. Just out of nowhere, they probably scheduled just thinking that this was going to pad their record, and it ended up being their downfall. So everybody that's involved in the program at Boston College, game ball to you.
I'm going to come out of left field with my game ball and give my game ball to T. Martin. Memphis, I know you and I were really high on Tennessee giving them a call, but I'm going to give T. Martin a game ball because he dodged a bullet, I think. I think he would have taken that Tennessee job, and I think it's a blessing in disguise that they did not go with him. I think it's wrong that Philip Fulmer didn't tag him as his coach. I would actually be nervous if T. Martin took that job because I think he's one of the up-and-coming coaches in the rankings, and I think one more year of grooming at USC as their offensive coordinator, and look for him to get either a job at maybe the American Conference or maybe these lower-level Power 5 teams will take a stab at him, and I think he'll reward whatever team hires him greatly. Look out for that guy coming up in the future.
Interesting. Awesome take there.
All right, guys, that wraps up the show. We'll see you next week on College Tailgaters. Go Gators.
Go Illini.
Go Memphis, go.
See ya.
Later.